He froze as he noticed the amber eyes staring at him from the tree line. The bear wasn't running, it wasn't growling, it was watching. And then it stepped closer. The forest was quiet, but not in the way of absolute stillness. There was a rhythm, a muted symphony of distant bird calls, rustling leaves, and the soft murmur of a creek winding through the pine-studded valley. He had been hiking for hours, each step deliberate over uneven terrain, eyes scanning the forest floor for loose rocks or roots. Mist curled along the ground, diffusing the early morning light into pale shafts that struck the tips of ferns and the moss-covered rocks. He exhaled sharply, noticing the chill of dawn bite at his exposed skin, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. Yet, despite the isolation, something felt off. At first, he thought it was imagination. A shadow among the trunks of tall pines. A sudden movement in the corner of his vision. He paused, backpack heavy against his shoulders, scanning left and right, ears straining against the usual background sounds of the forest. That's when he saw it, amber eyes reflecting the first weak rays of sunlight, fixed on him from the tree line roughly 30 yards ahead. He froze mid-step, heartbeat hammering, adrenaline immediately sharpening every sense. The bear was enormous, adult size, thick brown fur mottled with streaks of gold from the morning sun, and its stance calm but alert. It didn't snarl or make a noise. It didn't charge or retreat. It simply watched. There was an intensity in its gaze, a silent intelligence that made him feel simultaneously insignificant and observed in a way that no human presence could replicate. Every instinct in his body screamed caution. His legs trembled slightly, but he forced himself to remain still, aware that sudden movement could trigger a predatory response, or worse, provoke unnecessary aggression. The forest seemed to hold its breath, amplifying the tension. A fallen branch snapped in the distance, sending a flurry of birds into the air, wings flapping wildly against the calm morning. The bear's head tilted slightly, ears flicking toward the sound, muscles flexing subtly under the thick coat. His stomach tightened, a cold knot forming as he realized that whatever was about to unfold, he had no control over it. The bear was the actor here, not him. The forest had chosen its terms, and he was merely a witness. He tried to remember every survival tip he had read, every advice given by rangers and wildlife experts: don't run, don't scream, maintain eye contact without appearing threatening, slowly back away. But all of it felt inadequate as he stared into those amber eyes, noting the subtle intelligence behind them. The bear's gaze was unflinching, observing, calculating, and perhaps even assessing him as a presence in its domain. He swallowed hard, throat dry, trying to regulate his breathing so as not to attract sudden attention. Then, something even more unsettling happened. The bear took a slow step forward, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Its massive paw landed silently on the soft forest floor, barely disturbing the fallen leaves, yet the movement felt monumental, charged with unspoken significance. His body froze, every muscle taut, as he realized that he was no longer merely observed, he was being approached. The bear's eyes remained locked on him, head tilting slightly as it adjusted its stance, evaluating his reaction. Time seemed to stretch. Each second was a lifetime as he assessed his options, or lack thereof. He could see the power coiled in the bear's limbs, the precision in its movements, the alertness in its posture. This was not a random animal wandering aimlessly through the forest, this was a deliberate presence, a creature aware of him, aware of the environment, aware of the delicate balance in this clearing of trees, moss, and fallen leaves. He realized, with a chill crawling up his spine, that the forest had orchestrated this moment perfectly, a solitary human, A watchful predator and a world in perfect, raw equilibrium. His mind raced with questions. Was it hungry? Was it curious? Was it testing him or herself as he instinctively anthropomorphized the intelligence in its amber eyes? He tried to recall what he had learned from nature documentaries and personal observation. Bears rarely attack humans unless provoked or protecting offspring. Yet nothing about this situation was predictable. The bear's calm intelligence suggested awareness and purpose, and he had become part of its focus. His pulse thudded in his ears as he considered the implications. Every move he made, every step he took, could ripple through this tense encounter. Another step forward. The bear had closed roughly 10 yards without breaking its focus. He could see the fine hairs on its muzzle twitching, nostrils flaring slightly as it sniffed the air. Its movements were deliberate, balanced, patient, an embodiment of controlled power. He realized that whatever anxiety he felt, whatever fear had gripped him in the initial seconds, was now a mixture of awe and primal respect. The forest had presented him with a living example of survival, intelligence, and instinct all coalescing in one massive, amber-eyed presence. Then, the bear froze again, paw lifted slightly off the ground, ears twitching. A gust of wind shifted the mist around him, carrying scents from the forest that he could not identify but knew were being analyzed by this magnificent creature. He could almost feel its perception extending beyond sight and sound, touching the very fabric of the forest, reading him, reading the space, reading the potential. He wanted to step back, but his legs refused. He was anchored by fear, curiosity, and the strange pull of witnessing something raw and unfiltered. And then he noticed it, a subtle shift in the bear's posture, a flicker of attention toward the tree line behind it. His heart skipped a beat. The bear was aware not only of him but of something else. Perhaps a sound he hadn't detected, a movement invisible to his human eyes, or even another animal watching silently. His mind raced with possibilities. Could there be cubs nearby? Was it aware of another predator? Every instinct screamed caution, yet he was rooted to the spot, compelled by fascination and the raw emotional weight of the encounter. Suddenly, the bear took another deliberate step forward. Mist swirled around its massive form, sunlight catching the wet tips of fur on its shoulders. He felt an almost cinematic quality to the movement, the tension in the forest, the narrative unfolding around him in real time. It was a lesson in patience, observation, and emotional intensity, an experience few humans would ever witness firsthand. The bear's eyes never left his, amber pools of curiosity, intelligence, and cautious engagement. He forced himself to exhale slowly, aware that his tension was palpable, that every subtle movement might provoke an unforeseen response. Yet the bear seemed to recognize this, adjusting its stance only slightly, muscles coiled but not aggressive, powerful yet patient. His mind spun with awe, fear, and a strange sense of connection. The forest had become a theater, the bear a silent teacher, and he, an unwilling yet privileged student. Just as he thought he could perhaps understand the bear's intentions, it paused, lifted its massive head, and tilted it slightly to the side, as if making a decision. Its next move would determine everything. Step forward or retreat. Trust or caution. Observation or confrontation. Heart hammering, breath shallow, he waited, utterly frozen in the quiet tension of the misty forest clearing. The forest seemed to close in around him, shadows thickening between the trunks as the mist swirled like a living curtain. Every movement of the leaves, every glint of sunlight on a dew-drenched branch, demanded his attention. The bear had paused, head tilted slightly, amber eyes reflecting the diffused morning light with a penetrating clarity that made him acutely aware of his own vulnerability. He felt the weight of the moment pressing on his chest, the primal awareness of being observed by a predator that could dominate him in seconds, yet was, paradoxically, restrained and patient. He exhaled slowly, trying to slow the rapid rhythm of his pulse. Every muscle in his body was taut with adrenaline, ready to react, but he knew that any sudden movement could break the delicate balance he was witnessing. The bear's stance was deliberate, controlled, each paw placement calculated with precision. He noted the subtle twitch of the ears, the slight shift of weight from one massive leg to the other. The animal was intelligent, calculating, assessing, and fully aware of the human standing frozen before it. The tension was palpable, thick in the air like the mist curling around the forest floor. He tried to recall all the advice he had read about bear encounters: maintain eye contact without staring aggressively, avoid sudden movements, slowly back away if the bear approached. Yet, all of it felt inadequate now, insufficient for the cinematic immediacy of the moment. The bear's amber eyes seemed to pierce through him, evaluating not just his actions but his intent, his presence, and perhaps even his understanding of the environment itself. Another step forward. The forest shifted subtly around him as the bear moved, a soundless motion that carried the weight of its bulk yet did not disturb the delicate stillness of fallen leaves and moss. He could see the fine hairs along its muzzle ripple with tension, nostrils flaring as it assessed the air. The bear was closing in, but not aggressively. There was a patience, a quiet intelligence that made the encounter feel almost sacred, as though he were witnessing a ritual of trust, observation, and natural dominance. The mist swirled thicker now, curling around the trees and riverbank, obscuring parts of the forest while revealing others in shafts of pale sunlight. He noticed that the bear's gaze flicked occasionally to the edges of the tree line, as if aware of another presence or sound he couldn't perceive. Perhaps another animal, perhaps a subtle shift in the forest itself, a predator or rival observing silently from a distance. The awareness in those amber eyes was unnerving and mesmerizing all at once. He could feel the primal connection between predator and prey, observer and observed, human and wild creature, playing out in real time around him. He shifted his weight slightly, just enough to adjust balance, and immediately regretted it. The bear's head lifted slightly, amber eyes locking onto him again, muscles coiled like springs, yet not aggressive. It was aware, calculating, and patient. He swallowed hard, heart pounding in his throat, trying to regulate breathing so as not to provoke sudden action. Each second stretched into an eternity as he realized that he was no longer merely a hiker. He had become part of the forest's theater, a participant in a story dictated by instinct, intelligence, and trust. A gust of wind shifted the mist, carrying scents of pine, wet earth, and something else he could not identify. The bear's nose twitched, nostrils flaring as it inhaled deeply, head tilting, ears flicking. Its movements were deliberate but fluid, a masterclass in controlled power and observation. He realized with growing awe that the bear was not acting on aggression but on curiosity, intelligence, and perhaps a subtle social assessment. He was witnessing behavior that few humans ever observed in the wild, patient, calculated, and deeply emotional, a subtle dance of instinct and cognition. Another step. The bear had now closed within 20 feet, each movement precise, measured, controlled. He noticed the massive paws barely disturbing the moss and leaves below, each placement deliberate, absorbing weight without excess force. The muscles in its shoulders rippled with every subtle motion, yet there was a calm authority in its presence. He remained frozen, hands low, eyes soft, exhaling slowly, fully aware that any sudden motion could disrupt this fragile equilibrium. And then a shift in posture caught his attention. The bear lowered its head slightly, eyes flicking toward a faint rustle in the underbrush. He followed the line of sight, and for the first time noticed a subtle movement in the shadows behind a thick cluster of ferns. Something small and quick darted behind the greenery. He couldn't identify it, but the bear reacted instantly, muscles tightening slightly, amber eyes narrowing. It was protective, cautious, yet patient. The presence of a potential threat, invisible to him, underscored the bear's intelligence, awareness, and situational mastery. His mind raced with possibilities. Was it a rival? A cub hidden nearby? A predator moving stealthily? He could feel the tension coil like a spring in the air, and his pulse quickened, awareness sharpening to almost unbearable degrees. The bear's stance remained commanding but controlled, muscles flexing in readiness while eyes never left him. He realized that despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, there was a profound lesson unfolding, a raw, emotional demonstration of intelligence, trust, and situational awareness in the wild. The mist shifted again, curling along the riverbank, revealing small details, the ferns glistening with dew, moss clinging to stones, and subtle movements of wildlife disturbed by the morning's tension. The bear took another careful step, and for a moment he thought it would pause. Instead, it continued its deliberate advance, amber eyes fixed, muscles coiled but calm. His stomach tightened, he felt a mix of fear and awe so intense it was almost paralyzing. This was not aggression, yet the weight of the bear's presence was inescapable. He tried to move his fingers slightly, brushing against the strap of his backpack, to see if the bear reacted. Instantly, it lifted its massive head, nostrils flaring, ears twitching. He froze immediately, realizing that the bear was attuned to the smallest gestures. Every movement mattered. Every subtle shift could alter the delicate balance of trust and observation. The forest seemed alive, every sound amplified, the soft murmur of the creek, distant bird calls, the rustling of leaves in the wind, all converging into a cinematic stage for the drama unfolding between human and wild. And then he saw the twist, the bear's head tilted again, amber eyes flicking not just toward him but toward the underbrush and distant tree line. Its muscles remained coiled, but there was a shift, subtle yet profound, that suggested recognition, assessment, and decision-making. He realized with a shock that the bear was not acting randomly or instinctively in the way he had expected. It was making choices, deliberate ones, evaluating the environment, the human, and perhaps even the unseen presence in the forest. His awe deepened, tempered by a spike of adrenaline. Just as he began to adjust his stance to back away slowly, the bear froze completely, one paw lifted off the ground. Its gaze sharpened, amber eyes narrowing, muscles taut like a drawn bow. He noticed every detail, the slight flare of the nostrils, the subtle shift in the weight on the hind legs, the soft flick of the ears. The forest seemed to still around him, the air thick with suspense, mist curling as if holding its breath. Every second was loaded with uncertainty. And then, just as he thought the bear might retreat or wait passively, it stepped closer, another deliberate, silent movement that reduced the distance between them by several feet. He could feel the ground beneath him almost vibrating with the weight of the moment, his chest tightening, adrenaline surging. The bear's amber eyes never wavered. They remained locked on him with an intelligence and intensity that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. His heart hammered in his chest, and for a moment the forest fell completely silent, as if nature itself were waiting to see what would happen next. The bear's next move would determine the outcome of this encounter. step forward again, stand its ground, or retreat. And he realized that, despite the weeks of reading, training, and preparation, he was fully at the mercy of this magnificent, intelligent creature. The bear paused, paw hovering above the mossy ground, amber eyes fixed on him. Its next move would either escalate the encounter or reveal something he could never have anticipated. The mist thickened, curling around the clearing, hiding what lay just beyond the tree line. He swallowed hard, realizing that in a heartbeat everything could change. The air in the forest seemed to thicken around him, almost tangible, pressing against his chest as though the wilderness itself were holding its breath in anticipation. He remained frozen, each muscle taut, eyes locked on the amber gaze of the bear just a dozen feet away. Its massive paw, suspended mid-step, made him feel as though the world had paused, the only motion the faint drift of mist curling through the towering pines. The sunlight, thin and diffused through the morning haze, glinted off droplets on the fur of the bear, highlighting its muscular shoulders and the sheer power contained in its form. He could feel every subtle twitch of the bear's ears, the tiny flare of its nostrils as it sniffed the air, the low rumble of breath from its chest vibrating the stillness around them. His own breath had slowed into shallow, controlled exhalations, but each one felt loud in the quiet, tense forest. It was as if the bear was not just observing him, it was studying him, weighing his presence against the surroundings, the wind, and the subtle noises of the underbrush. The realization that he had become part of the bear's scrutiny sent a shiver down his spine. Another step forward, slow, deliberate, measured. The bear's weight pressed into the forest floor with astonishing grace, barely disturbing the moss and fallen leaves beneath its paws. His heart pounded in response, and he fought the urge to move, knowing that any sudden gesture could shatter this fragile equilibrium. The forest itself seemed alive, every sound amplified, a branch snapping in the distance, the soft murmur of the creek, the distant caw of a raven. The bear reacted subtly, muscles flexing with intent, eyes flicking momentarily to the tree line, assessing some unseen factor beyond his perception. He tried to remind himself of the basics: do not run, do not scream, do not turn your back. But survival instincts, finely honed over countless encounters with urban stress and human uncertainty, suddenly felt inadequate in the face of this wild, primal intelligence. The bear wasn't just a creature of instinct, it was a conscious, aware being, calculating its environment, gauging risk, and making deliberate choices. He had expected fear, unpredictability, perhaps aggression, but this was different. This was a test of patience, trust, and human composure, all unfolding in real time. A sudden shift in the wind carried scents from the riverbank, a blend of damp earth, pine resin, and something more elusive, a faint trace of movement from another living creature nearby. The bear's ears flicked, nostrils flaring, muscles tightening just enough to convey alertness without aggression. It was aware of things he could neither see nor hear. Another subtle step forward brought it closer, its amber eyes unwavering, and he realized that the space between them had shrunk to barely 10 feet. He forced himself to remain calm, but every fiber of his body screamed at him to flee. His mind raced through every potential scenario. Could it be a mother with cubs nearby? Could it see him as a threat, or worse, as prey? Yet the bear's movements conveyed neither hostility nor fear. They were deliberate, cautious, almost reverential in their execution. He understood then that he was not witnessing randomness, he was witnessing a structured, deliberate engagement, a dance between human and wild, predator and observer, survival and understanding. The mist thickened, curling along the forest floor, cloaking the subtle shapes of rocks, roots, and fallen branches. He could see the bear's reflection in a small puddle near the creek, powerful, imposing, yet patient, amber eyes glinting in the pale light. For a moment, he thought he caught sight of movement behind it, another presence, possibly a smaller animal, possibly a cub. His pulse spiked, awareness sharpening to an almost painful degree. Every decision the bear made seemed intentional, every subtle movement measured, yet he had no way of predicting the next step. He tried to speak, whispering his own name to test the bear's reaction, but his voice barely carried through the dense forest. The bear's head tilted slightly, nostrils twitching, and for an instant he wondered if it understood him, or merely sensed the vibrations of sound as part of its environmental awareness. He froze, realizing the thin line he was walking between observation and provocation. His presence had already altered the forest dynamic, but he was powerless to influence the outcome beyond subtle, careful movement. Then the bear lowered its head, sniffing closer to the ground, amber eyes never leaving him. The subtle shift in its posture sent a wave of tension through him. Was it investigating, searching for something? Or was this a test, a probe into his own reactions? The forest seemed suspended in a moment of raw emotional intensity, a silent conversation carried out in glances, movements, and the shared awareness of two living beings locked in a mutual observation. A sudden rustle in the underbrush caught both his attention and the bear's. He turned slightly to see what had caused the sound, a small deer darting through the mist, startled by the morning's tension. The bear's muscles flexed, but it did not pursue. Instead, it shifted its gaze back to him, eyes unwavering, calm yet commanding. He realized in that instant that the bear's attention was not divided by the presence of prey, it was focused entirely on him, on his reactions, on the subtle indicators of his intent, composure, and understanding. The mist continued to swirl, curling around roots, rocks, and ferns, creating a surreal, almost cinematic landscape. The bear moved closer, only a few feet away now. His hands trembled slightly, but he kept them low, avoiding sudden gestures, trying to communicate non-threat through posture alone. The forest seemed alive around them, every sound, every movement amplified, as if the world itself were watching this encounter unfold. The creek babbled quietly nearby, carrying reflections of pale light and rippling shadows across the mossy banks, emphasizing the fragile tension that balanced between awe, fear, and the wonder of witnessing life so intimately. Then, unexpectedly, the bear made a subtle pivot, shifting weight slightly to its left hind leg. His heart skipped a beat. This wasn't aggression, it was assessment. Observation. Calculation. And in that pivot, he noticed the unmistakable hint of recognition. The bear's gaze flicked toward a shadowy cluster of bushes to the right, muscles coiling slightly as if prepared to respond to something hidden from his view. His pulse quickened. What could it have detected that he could not? A predator? Another human? Or perhaps something entirely unexpected? As he stared, frozen, the mist parted momentarily to reveal movement behind the ferns. A second bear emerged, smaller, slightly younger, cautious, but clearly related to the first. His breath caught in his throat as he realized the implications. The bear he had first seen was not alone. Its watchful approach, its deliberate steps, had been protective, measured, and patient. The second bear, likely a cub or juvenile, moved cautiously but confidently under the observation and guidance of the larger bear. The first bear's amber eyes flicked between him and the newcomer, and in that glance, he felt the unmistakable intelligence of parental instinct, awareness, and subtle communication. The forest seemed to constrict around him, each sound amplified, the creek's soft babble, the whisper of wind through the pines, the subtle rustle of leaves as the smaller bear tested the terrain. His heart pounded as he realized that he was witnessing a family dynamic, a silent teaching moment in the wilderness, and he was an intruder, not a threat, but an observer, caught in the delicate web of nature's intelligence. The tension was no longer just about proximity, it was now about trust, patience, and understanding the unspoken rules of coexistence. And then, without warning, the first bear's stance shifted again. Amber eyes locked on him, muscles coiled but not threatening, head lowered slightly as if to indicate, follow. His mind raced. Was it inviting him to move? Warning him? Or testing his instinct to respect boundaries? The forest seemed to hold its breath once more, the mist curling thicker now, sunlight dimming through the canopy. He felt both fear and awe, fear of the unknown, awe of the intelligence and presence of the bear before him. The bear stepped aside slightly, gaze still fixed, nudging the smaller bear forward. The forest seemed to echo with anticipation, every rustle, shadow, and flicker of light emphasizing the weight of the moment. He realized that whatever choice he made next could define the encounter. One wrong step, and he could disrupt the fragile balance of trust that had developed in the space of mere minutes. And in that breathless instant, he understood this was not just a close encounter. It was a lesson, a story, a moment suspended between life, instinct, and understanding, where one misstep could alter everything. The forest seemed almost sacred in that moment, a theater of raw emotion and primal intelligence unfolding around him. The two bears had established their positions, one massive adult, amber eyes reflecting intelligence, patience, and authority, and a smaller, younger bear, tentative yet confident under the guidance of the first. He remained frozen, his chest tight, every nerve firing, acutely aware that any sudden move could provoke a reaction he might not survive. And yet, he felt a strange pull, a curiosity that demanded he understand the reason for this encounter, the motive behind the watchful eyes that had followed him across the mossy forest floor. The adult bear's gaze flicked toward him again, then toward the smaller bear. Its body language was subtle, almost imperceptible to an untrained eye, but he noticed the shift, the slight lowering of the shoulders, the calm but commanding stance, the delicate balance of tension and reassurance. This was a bear who knew its environment intimately, who understood not only its own power but the fragility of life around it. And now, he was part of that life, observed, assessed, and perhaps even tolerated. He slowly shifted weight, careful not to make sudden movements. His breath was slow, deliberate, almost ritualistic, trying to communicate calm through posture alone. The smaller bear, encouraged by the first, took a hesitant step toward him, nose twitching, amber eyes scanning his face for signs of threat. For a fleeting moment, he felt a connection, an awareness that transcended species, that bridged human understanding and animal instinct. Yet the tension remained palpable, every second loaded with potential consequences. Then came the twist, something he had not anticipated. The adult bear, after observing him and the smaller bear for several seconds, slowly turned its massive head toward the creek, nudging the younger bear gently in that direction. At first, he did not understand the significance. But as he followed their gaze, he realized what had drawn their attention, a fish, caught halfway between rocks in the shallow water, struggling against the current. The adult bear's presence, its careful positioning, and its deliberate approach were not acts of aggression or random curiosity, they were a calculated demonstration, a lesson in survival, patience, and observation. He exhaled sharply, heart racing, as the bear methodically reached the water's edge, paw lifted with precision, and scooped the fish effortlessly from the current. The smaller bear watched, amber eyes wide, muscles tensing and relaxing as it absorbed every subtle movement. It was a moment of instruction, a transfer of knowledge in the wild, conducted with patience and an unspoken bond. And he realized, with a surge of awe, that he had been a silent witness to this intimate interaction, a story unfolding before him that few humans ever experienced. The bear then glanced back at him, amber eyes meeting his, and in that gaze, he felt the unspoken acknowledgement of his presence. The adult bear had assessed him, determined he posed no threat, and yet it remained cautious, aware that human unpredictability could disrupt the fragile balance of the moment. He felt both relief and heightened tension, the relief of not being seen as a threat, the tension of understanding just how powerful and aware this creature truly was. The smaller bear, emboldened by the adult's actions, tentatively moved forward, attempting to mimic the paw movement. It slipped slightly on the moss-covered rock, ears flicking nervously, eyes wide with concentration. The adult bear's response was immediate but gentle, a corrective nudge, a subtle adjustment of positioning, a soft growl of instruction. He watched, transfixed, as the young bear regained its footing, learning the delicate interplay of force, precision, and patience required to catch the fish. Each movement carried weight, purpose, and emotional resonance, demonstrating the intelligence and emotional capacity of these animals in a way that no textbook or documentary could replicate. He took another slow step back, careful not to interrupt the delicate dance. The forest seemed to close in, mist curling around roots and rocks, the sound of the creek amplified in the quiet. He realized that this was more than a survival lesson, it was a display of trust, awareness, and the transmission of knowledge across generations. The adult bear was not simply hunting, it was teaching, nurturing, and demonstrating the intelligence inherent in its species. And he, human, was an uninvited but honored witness. A sudden rustle in the nearby underbrush drew his attention. He froze immediately, aware that the bears had also reacted. Amber eyes flicked toward the sound, muscles tensing subtly. But instead of moving aggressively, the adult bear positioned itself protectively, standing slightly between him and the source of the disturbance. The smaller bear mirrored the posture, tentatively observing but remaining under the adult's guidance. He realized in that moment that the bear's awareness extended beyond immediate needs. They were attuned to their environment, capable of assessment, caution, and decision-making that surpassed his expectations of animal intelligence. He swallowed hard, heart pounding, as the rustle grew louder. A small deer emerged, startled, and bolted through the clearing, disappearing into the forest. The adult bear relaxed subtly, amber eyes flicking back toward him, muscles easing just enough to convey calm. He exhaled slowly, the tension in his chest loosening fractionally, yet the awe he felt only deepened. He was witnessing behavior that was both instinctual and profoundly intelligent, a reminder of the raw beauty and complexity of life in the wild. Then, the adult bear did something unexpected. It took a single step closer to him, eyes locked, nostrils flaring slightly as if testing the air. He froze, unsure whether to move or remain still. But in that step, he sensed no threat, only awareness, curiosity, and perhaps a subtle invitation to observe more closely. The smaller bear mirrored the movement, gaining confidence, and he realized that the bears were guiding him, in their own way, through an encounter that was both emotional and educational. The morning sun had fully risen now, but the forest remained shrouded in mist, lending a surreal quality to the unfolding scene. The creek gurgled softly, the water moving over rocks with gentle persistence, yet each ripple seemed magnified in the charged silence of the forest. The adult bear had paused, massive frame tense but controlled, amber eyes locked on him with an intelligence that made him acutely aware of his vulnerability and the gravity of the encounter. The smaller bear crouched near the water, ears twitching, body coiled with youthful energy, clearly observing every subtle motion of its parent. He exhaled slowly, heart hammering, trying to steady the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Each breath felt loud in the stillness, yet he dared not speak, not even a whisper, fearing any sound might provoke a reaction he could not predict. The forest around him seemed alive, every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call, every subtle shift of mist amplified in importance. He felt as though he were in the presence of a living entity far larger than himself, not just the bears, but the forest itself, a theater of life, survival, and instinct. The adult bear shifted its stance, a deliberate movement that conveyed power, intelligence, and awareness. It was a master of its environment, fully attuned to every subtle detail, and now, he realized, he was part of that observation. His instincts screamed at him to flee, to retreat, yet something deeper held him in place. A mixture of awe, fear, and a primal understanding of the intelligence and emotional capacity of these creatures rooted him to the spot. The smaller bear, emboldened by the adult's calm but commanding presence, attempted another step toward the creek. Its movements were tentative, awkward, but deliberate, muscles coiled, amber eyes scanning the adult for guidance. He noticed every detail, the subtle ripple of fur along the bear's neck, the faint twitch of the ears, the slow, calculated shift of weight from one paw to another. The adult bear seemed to communicate without sound, nudging and positioning the smaller bear, demonstrating the subtleties of balance, force, and timing required to capture the fish struggling in the shallow water. The sheer intelligence on display was staggering, an emotional and cognitive depth that transcended instinct. This was teaching, nurturing, and subtle manipulation of the environment, a moment few humans ever witnessed. The forest, still shrouded in mist, carried a quiet tension. He sensed the coiled potential energy of the moment, the delicate balance between predator and observer, wildness and humanity. His eyes flicked to the underbrush, half expecting a hidden predator or another observer, yet all movement was contained to the creek and the two bears. He realized that he was a silent witness, caught in an extraordinary moment of raw emotion and intelligence. The adult bear's gaze flicked toward him, amber eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his stomach tighten. Then, unexpectedly, the adult bear stepped closer to the water, nudging the smaller bear forward once again. The younger bear hesitated, unsure, ears flat, muscles coiled. The adult bear let out a low, rumbling growl, not threatening, but instructive, a subtle communication that carried layers of meaning. The small bear adjusted its stance, pawing the water gently, attempting to mimic the adult's movements. The water splashed softly, droplets catching the diffused sunlight, creating a cinematic scene of wild grace, teaching, and observation. He felt a surge of emotion, fear interwoven with admiration, awe with humility. Here, in this isolated forest clearing, he had become a participant in a profound natural lesson, witnessing the intelligence, patience, and emotional capacity of creatures often underestimated by humans. Each movement, each glance, each subtle sound carried significance, revealing the depth of connection between parent and offspring, the transmission of knowledge across generations, and the delicate balance of trust required to maintain harmony in the wild. A sudden rustle from the far side of the creek drew his attention. His pulse spiked. The adult bear stiffened instantly, amber eyes narrowing, ears twitching. The smaller bear crouched, mirroring the parent's alertness. He realized that this was not just about catching fish or teaching, it was about survival, awareness, and the constant assessment of threats, both visible and unseen. The forest was alive with potential danger, and the bears navigated it with intelligence, patience, and instinct that dwarfed his own human perceptions. The rustling intensified. A flock of birds erupted from the underbrush, their startled calls piercing the tense silence. The adult bear released a low, measured growl, and the smaller bear froze, eyes wide, muscles tense. He noticed the subtle communication. The growl was neither aggressive nor defensive, but a calculated signal to maintain composure, to assess, to learn. The birds disappeared into the canopy, and the bear's amber eyes returned to him, steady, intelligent, and unyielding. His mind raced with questions. Why was the bear allowing him to remain so close? What did it intend by guiding the younger bear? And more importantly, what could he do to respect this encounter without disrupting the delicate balance of trust and observation? He remained motionless, sensing that the bear's awareness extended far beyond their immediate needs. Their intelligence encompassed assessment, teaching, and evaluation of risk, and he was caught within that spectrum. The mist thickened further, curling around the moss-covered rocks and ferns lining the creek. Sunlight filtered through in thin, pale rays, highlighting droplets on fur, leaves, and moss. Every detail of the bear's, the adult's massive shoulders, rippling muscles, amber eyes, the smaller bear's tentative movements, quick glances, and instinctive mimicry, was amplified by the cinematic clarity of the scene. He felt both insignificant and profoundly connected to the raw reality of life around him. Then came the emotional climax. The adult bear, having guided the smaller bear through its first successful catch, stepped toward him, amber eyes fixed with unwavering focus. The mist swirled, the creek reflected soft light, and for a moment the forest seemed suspended, every second stretching into eternity. He understood that this step was not a threat, but a test, a measure of trust, patience, and composure. He swallowed hard, feeling the primal connection between species, intelligence, and emotion, realizing that he was standing at the edge of a profound and fragile moment of mutual recognition. The smaller bear, encouraged by the adult, approached closer, eyes flicking to him with curiosity and tentative trust. The adult bear nudged gently, guiding, instructing, teaching. He felt a mix of exhilaration and fear, understanding that this was an encounter few humans ever experienced, a rare glimpse into the intelligence, emotional depth, and teaching behaviors of these remarkable creatures. The creek glistened, mist swirled, sunlight filtered through, and every element of the forest seemed to emphasize the gravity and beauty of the moment. Then, without warning, the adult bear paused, nostrils flaring, amber eyes narrowing. He felt a sudden tension in the air, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Something unseen had entered the scene, a subtle movement in the distant tree line, a shadow among the ferns. The adult bear shifted stance, muscles coiled, protective yet calculated, nudging the smaller bear back slightly. He realized with a jolt that the bears were not only aware of his presence, they were aware of everything in their environment, assessing, responding, and preparing for potential outcomes with a level of intelligence that left him in awe. The adult bear lifted its head, amber eyes locking with his, massive frame tense but calm, nostrils flaring. The smaller bear crouched beside it, eyes wide, ears flat, muscles coiled with anticipation. The unseen movement in the forest remained, hidden behind mist and shadow, yet every subtle sign indicated awareness and potential threat. He understood that the next moment could define not just the bear's behavior, but his own survival, and the forest seemed to pulse with the weight of possibility, danger, and extraordinary natural intelligence. The forest seemed to tighten around him, the mist curling like a living presence, wrapping every tree, fern, and rock in a soft, damp shroud. The creek's gentle murmur had become the soundtrack of a tense standoff, its waters reflecting shafts of diffused sunlight that barely penetrated the dense canopy. The adult bear remained at the creek's edge, amber eyes fixed on him with unwavering attention. Its massive form exuded power and patience, the coiled muscles beneath its thick fur hinting at strength restrained. The smaller bear crouched nearby, tentative but attentive, clearly learning from every subtle cue the adult provided. He remained motionless, careful not to breathe too loudly, not to shift weight too abruptly. Every instinct screamed for him to flee, yet an unspoken fascination held him in place. This was no ordinary encounter, this was a moment of raw, emotional connection and natural intelligence, unfolding in a forest where survival depended on awareness, patience, and respect. Every rustle in the underbrush, every distant bird call, every shifting beam of sunlight carried significance, heightened by the bear's acute perception of the environment. The adult bear took a deliberate step toward the creek, nudging the smaller bear forward. Amber eyes flicked to the water, assessing the subtle currents, the rocks partially submerged, and the fish moving with a sluggish persistence against the flow. The smaller bear mirrored the movement, paws splashing lightly as it attempted to imitate the adult's technique. He watched, captivated, as the adult bear demonstrated the balance of precision, timing, and strength required to catch the fish. Each motion was deliberate, calculated, a lesson in survival transmitted with patient, intelligent guidance. A sudden shift in the forest caught his attention, a faint crack of a branch somewhere beyond the creek. Both bears froze instantly, muscles coiled, ears flicking toward the sound. The adult bear shifted slightly, positioning itself protectively between the noise and the smaller bear. His pulse quickened. He realized that the bear's awareness extended beyond immediate survival. They were constantly evaluating risk, ready to respond to threats unseen. He was witnessing intelligence that transcended instinct, a combination of foresight, experience, and emotional perception that left him both awed and tense. The mist thickened, curling around moss-covered roots and ferns, creating a nearly cinematic tableau. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in thin, golden shafts, illuminating the bear's fur and highlighting the tension in their movements. The smaller bear's amber eyes flicked nervously between the adult and the unseen disturbance. Its tentative steps, coiled muscles, and cautious glances mirrored a learning process that he could only partially comprehend. He realized the encounter was more than a lesson in fishing, it was a display of communication, awareness, and teaching, a subtle interplay of observation and instinct that few humans ever witnessed in the wild. The forest held its breath as a rustle grew louder. He tensed, unsure whether to prepare to flee or remain frozen. The adult bear's gaze never wavered, it assessed the unseen presence with patience, control, and awareness. The smaller bear crouched lower, tentative, but guided by the adult's calm authority. Every flicker of amber eye, every subtle shift of muscle, every cautious step conveyed intention and intelligence. The forest seemed to pulse with possibility and danger, a living theater of life and instinct. Then, without warning, the adult bear shifted, stepping closer toward him. Amber eyes locked on his face, nostrils flaring, yet the movement carried no threat, only observation, curiosity, and perhaps a measure of trust. The smaller bear mirrored the movement, emboldened by the adult's calm presence. He swallowed hard, every nerve in his body on high alert. This step was not aggressive, yet its significance was impossible to misinterpret. He was being measured, evaluated, acknowledged. The adult bear's intelligence and patience were clear, and he felt a mixture of awe, humility, and fear. A soft gurgle from the creek broke the silence. The smaller bear pawed the water lightly, attempting to mimic the adult's movements in catching fish. A splash, small, tentative, but enough to demonstrate progress. The adult bear observed, making subtle corrections with a gentle nudge, an adjustment of stance, a low growl of instruction. He felt an odd sense of connection, caught in the middle of this exchange, a silent observer to a lesson few humans ever witnessed. The emotional weight of the moment was palpable, awe, tension, fear, and fascination all intertwined. Then came the twist, the source of the rustle emerged from the mist. A second adult bear appeared, moving cautiously along the tree line. Its amber eyes were wary, body coiled with controlled energy, nostrils flaring as it assessed the situation. The first adult bear's gaze flicked toward the newcomer, muscles tightening briefly and then relaxing. The smaller bear crouched instinctively, watching, learning from the interaction. He realized with a jolt that the first bear had been waiting, positioning itself not just to teach the younger bear, but to monitor the approach of another, potentially threatening adult. He froze, heart pounding, aware that he had stumbled into a complex social dynamic of the wild. The forest had become a stage for survival, awareness, and emotional intelligence on a level he had never comprehended. The first adult bear's amber eyes flicked back to him, assessing, calculating, acknowledging his presence while maintaining a clear boundary. The second adult bear stopped at the edge of the clearing, nostrils flaring, muscles coiled with alertness. The tension between the two adults was palpable, a silent negotiation of space, hierarchy, and intention. The smaller bear remained between them, crouched and tense, absorbing every signal, learning the subtle language of posture, eye movement, and sound. He marveled at the complexity, the intelligence, the awareness displayed. This was survival, instruction, and communication, all happening in a single, tense moment. Every decision carried weight, every subtle gesture conveyed meaning. He realized that the bear's awareness extended far beyond instinct. It encompassed strategy, teaching, and social negotiation. Then, the first adult bear stepped forward slightly, amber eyes locking with his once again. The smaller bear mirrored the movement, muscles coiled but attentive. The second adult bear hesitated, nostrils flaring, eyes scanning, then slowly relaxed, stepping back slightly into the tree line. The first bear returned its focus to him, eyes unwavering, body tense but controlled. He felt the profound weight of the encounter. He was witnessing intelligence, emotional capacity, and survival skills in their purest form, all interacting in a fragile equilibrium. The creek reflected the tension, sunlight glinting off water droplets on moss, rocks, and fur. Mist swirled around the clearing, adding a cinematic quality to the scene. Every movement, every glance, every rustle in the underbrush carried amplified significance. He understood that the bear's behavior was not just instinctual, it was layered with intelligence, emotional awareness, and social negotiation. He was caught in the middle, an intruder yet honored observer, bearing witness to a complex moment few humans would ever experience. The first adult bear stepped even closer, nostrils flaring, amber eyes locking with his as if inviting him to understand, to respect, to recognize the fragile trust extended. The smaller bear crouched beside it, following its lead, while the second adult remained in the shadows, observing silently. The forest held its breath, mist swirling around, creek reflecting the tension, and he realized that the next move could alter everything: trust, safety, and the balance of the moment. The forest seemed to hold its breath as he stood frozen, aware that every subtle movement, every sound, carried enormous weight. The creek bubbled gently over rocks, but the serenity was deceptive. Each ripple, each drop, was a reminder of the delicate balance between life and danger in this untamed wilderness. The adult bear at the creek edge, massive and commanding, continued to observe him, amber eyes unwavering. Its muscles rippled beneath thick fur, tense yet controlled, a perfect embodiment of awareness and instinct. The smaller bear, still learning, mirrored the adult's movements, tentative but determined, eyes flicking nervously between him and the flowing water. He exhaled slowly, trying to steady the adrenaline racing through his body. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, to retreat into the safety of higher ground or behind a tree, but he couldn't move. He was captivated, trapped by awe, fear, and fascination. The adult bear's gaze remained locked on him, amber eyes sharp, measuring, intelligent, evaluating his intentions, his demeanor, his threat level. The smaller bear crouched beside it, muscles coiled, eyes wide, following every subtle cue from the adult. He realized he was witnessing a profound display of communication, teaching, and awareness in real time, a window into a level of intelligence few humans ever experienced. The mist thickened, curling around moss-covered rocks, roots, and ferns, softening the edges of the clearing and adding a cinematic quality to the encounter. Light filtered through the canopy in thin, pale beams, illuminating fur, water droplets, and leaves with delicate precision. The adult bear's posture shifted slightly, head tilting toward him, nostrils flaring, amber eyes studying him with a mixture of curiosity and patience. The smaller bear mirrored the movement, stepping cautiously closer to the creek, eager to attempt another fishing maneuver. Each motion carried meaning, a silent lesson in timing, precision, and survival. Then the unexpected occurred. The adult bear shifted focus from him to the creek, nudging the smaller bear toward a particular rock. The fish trapped in the shallow water struggled against the current, unaware of the teaching taking place above it. The smaller bear crouched, paw raised, and in one fluid, deliberate motion, swept the fish from the water with surprising skill. The adult bear's head tilted, amber eyes gleaming with satisfaction, a subtle acknowledgement of the younger bear's success. He marveled at the intelligence, patience, and emotional connection unfolding before him. This was not mere instinct, this was education, guidance, and trust manifested in fur and muscle. Suddenly, a sharp noise broke the fragile rhythm of the forest. A branch snapped somewhere beyond the clearing, hidden by mist. The adult bear stiffened instantly, muscles coiling, amber eyes narrowing, nostrils flaring as it scanned the underbrush. The smaller bear crouched, tense, ears flat, awaiting instruction. His own heart raced. He realized with a jolt that the bear's awareness extended far beyond immediate survival. They were acutely attuned to the forest, to movement, to subtle shifts that he would have missed entirely. The forest was alive with signals, and the bears read them fluently, every flicker of shadow a potential threat. The second adult bear, previously hidden in the tree line, stepped forward slightly, amber eyes flicking toward the first. Its movements were deliberate but cautious, muscles coiled, nostrils flaring as it assessed the situation. The tension between the two adults was palpable, a silent negotiation of space, hierarchy, and awareness. The smaller bear crouched low, absorbing every signal, learning without instruction how to interpret posture, eye movement, and subtle growls. He realized he was witnessing not just survival, but intelligence, social hierarchy, and teaching behavior in action. A rare glimpse into a world humans seldom experience firsthand. Then came the twist. The first adult bear, after nudging the smaller bear successfully to catch a second fish, lifted its massive head and stepped closer toward him. Amber eyes locked onto his, nostrils flaring, yet the movement carried no aggression, only measured awareness, curiosity, and a subtle invitation to observe further. The smaller bear mirrored the step, muscles coiled but controlled, eyes bright with cautious confidence. He swallowed hard, realizing that this step was both a test and a demonstration of trust, a bridge between species, a silent acknowledgement of his presence and restraint. The mist swirled thicker, wrapping the clearing in a veil that softened edges and amplified tension. Light filtered in shafts, illuminating water droplets, fur, and moss-covered rocks, creating an almost ethereal, cinematic tableau. Each detail of the bears, the adult's rippling muscles, the smaller bear's tentative pawing, the intelligent gaze of amber eyes, was heightened by the mist and filtered sunlight. He felt both insignificant and intimately connected to the raw intelligence and emotional depth of these animals. Every heartbeat, every shallow breath, carried him deeper into the drama of the encounter. Without warning, the first adult bear shifted attention to the second adult, stepping slightly to assert presence. The smaller bear crouched instinctively, observing every nuanced gesture. The creek reflected the tension, sunlight catching droplets on rocks and fur. Then the first adult bear made a subtle, low growl, a sound neither threatening nor friendly, but communicative, instructive. The second adult hesitated, muscles coiling, then relaxed fractionally, acknowledging the hierarchy established in the clearing. He realized that the bears were engaged in social negotiation, survival strategies, and communication, all while including him in their observation. The forest seemed to close in, mist curling around every branch, every fern, every moss-covered rock. The creek's soft murmur was the only sound apart from distant birdsong, yet it carried the weight of life, survival, and observation. He was acutely aware that his presence, however passive, was part of this intricate social and emotional system. The first adult bear's amber eyes flicked back toward him, observing, assessing, measuring the limits of human restraint. The smaller bear crouched beside it, eyes wide, muscles coiled, mirroring the adult's awareness, learning the complex dynamics of presence, threat, and observation. Suddenly, the first adult bear took a decisive step toward the creek, nudging the smaller bear to attempt another fishing maneuver. Mist curled around fur and rocks, light glinting off rippling water. The smaller bear crouched, paw poised, and in a single, fluid motion, captured the fish. The adult bear tilted its massive head, amber eyes gleaming with approval, a subtle acknowledgement that learning had occurred. He marveled at the intelligence, awareness, and emotional depth on display, the capacity to teach, to guide, and to communicate without words. From the tree line, another subtle movement, a shadow, a rustle, a hint of something unseen. Both adult bears froze, amber eyes narrowing, muscles coiled, nostrils flaring. The smaller bear crouched, sensing the heightened tension. The forest seemed suspended, every leaf, every branch, every ripple in the creek amplified in significance. He realized that the next moment could redefine the encounter entirely, a decision point where trust, survival, and awareness converged. The forest around him seemed to pulse with an almost tangible tension. Mist hung thick between the trunks of towering pines, curling in soft tendrils around mossy rocks and ferns, creating an ethereal veil that both concealed and revealed. Sunlight pierced the canopy in scattered, pale beams, glinting off droplets on leaves and rippling water in the creek. The adult bear's massive frame remained taut with alertness, muscles coiled beneath thick brown fur, amber eyes piercing him with measured curiosity. The smaller bear crouched beside it, observing carefully, muscles tight, as if aware of the gravity of the moment. A subtle rustle in the underbrush caused both bears to stiffen. The first adult pivoted slightly, positioning itself protectively in front of the smaller bear. He could feel the tension in the air as though the forest itself were holding its breath. Every instinct screamed for him to retreat, yet a strange mixture of fear and awe rooted him to the spot. He realized that this encounter was far beyond a casual observation of wildlife. It was an intimate lesson in intelligence, emotion, and instinct. The bears were teaching, communicating, and navigating an unseen threat, all while he stood at the edge of the clearing, caught in the silent drama. The creek gurgled over rocks, its gentle murmuring contrasting sharply with the heightened awareness radiating from the two bears. The smaller bear stepped cautiously closer to the water, attempting to mirror the adult's movements. Paw raised, muscles coiled, it tried again to capture a fish struggling against the current. The adult bear watched closely, amber eyes glinting with approval as the younger bear succeeded. He marveled at the intelligence on display, the nuanced teaching methods, the patience, and the subtle communication that transcended species. This was survival, instruction, and trust manifested in every gesture. Suddenly, movement from the distant tree line caught his attention. Shadows flickered in the mist, subtle but deliberate. Both adult bears stiffened, heads lifting, nostrils flaring as they assessed the presence. The smaller bear crouched, tense and alert, eyes flicking between the two adults. He realized with a jolt that the forest was alive with signals invisible to the human eye. Every sound, every movement, every ripple in the mist carried meaning. The first adult bear's amber gaze shifted back to him for a fleeting moment, evaluating his reaction, measuring the limits of human understanding and restraint. Then came the twist. A second, larger adult bear emerged from the shadows, moving cautiously but purposefully toward the creek. Its coat was darker, almost black, and its amber eyes scanned the clearing with intelligence and measured caution. The first adult bear's posture shifted subtly, muscles tensing, yet it did not attack or retreat. Instead, it positioned itself strategically, nudging the smaller bear behind it while maintaining an unwavering gaze on the newcomer. He realized with awe that this was not aggression but a complex social negotiation, a silent communication of hierarchy, protection, and situational awareness. The smaller bear crouched low, ears flat, eyes bright and alert, observing every nuanced movement. The first adult nudged it gently, guiding its attention, instructing it without words, preparing it for the subtle social dynamics at play. He was witnessing intelligence layered with emotional awareness, teaching, and risk assessment in a real-world context that few humans would ever experience. The creek reflected the tension, sunlight catching droplets on fur and rocks, mist curling around moss and ferns to create a cinematic tableau. A soft snap of a branch echoed through the clearing. The newcomer bear paused, nostrils flaring, muscles coiled. The first adult bear let out a low, rumbling growl, not a threat, but a measured warning, a subtle assertion of space and authority. The smaller bear crouched instinctively, muscles tight, ears flicking nervously. He understood with a mix of fear and fascination that the bears were engaged in a nuanced conversation of posture, scent, and movement, a silent dialogue layered with intelligence and emotional awareness. Then, almost imperceptibly, the first adult bear stepped slightly closer to him. Amber eyes locked onto his, nostrils flaring, yet the movement carried no threat, only measured curiosity, trust, and an acknowledgement of his restraint. The smaller bear mirrored the movement, emboldened by the adult's calm authority. He felt an unexpected wave of emotion, fear mingled with profound awe and respect. He realized he was not merely observing, he was part of a living lesson in intelligence, patience, and emotional depth. The second adult bear shifted again, stepping slightly back, eyes narrowing, nostrils flaring as it reassessed the situation. The smaller bear crouched low, following the subtle guidance of the first adult, muscles tight with awareness. Every rustle of leaves, every ripple of the creek, every faint glint of sunlight on fur was magnified in significance. He understood that he was witnessing survival and social negotiation in its purest form, intelligence, emotion, and instinct all woven together in a living demonstration. The mist thickened, swirling around moss-covered rocks and ferns, creating a sense of isolation and heightened focus. The first adult bear continued to guide the smaller bear, nudging it gently toward the water, encouraging it to attempt another fishing maneuver. Paw lifted, muscles coiled, the smaller bear struck with precision, catching another fish. The adult tilted its massive head, amber eyes gleaming with satisfaction. He marveled at the combination of intelligence, teaching, and emotional connection on display. Suddenly, a loud crack from deeper in the forest froze him in place. Both adult bears snapped their heads toward the sound, muscles coiled, nostrils flaring. The smaller bear crouched, eyes wide, ears flat, sensing the tension. He realized with a jolt that the unseen movement had escalated the stakes. The forest seemed to pulse with awareness, the mist thickening around every branch and root. The creek's gentle murmur now carried the weight of tension, every ripple a silent signal of heightened alertness. The first adult bear stepped protectively in front of the smaller one, amber eyes flicking to him briefly, as if to gauge his reaction. He felt a surge of adrenaline, mixed with awe at the level of intelligence and emotional depth displayed. The second adult bear remained partially concealed in the tree line, amber eyes sharp, assessing, measuring, calculating. The smaller bear crouched low, learning from both adults, muscles coiled but ready. The forest had become a living classroom, every gesture, glance, and sound teaching lessons in awareness, trust, and survival. The first adult bear lifted its head fully, amber eyes locking with his, nostrils flaring, a low, measured growl resonating in its chest. The smaller bear crouched beside it, tense but attentive. The second adult bear emerged fully from the shadows, massive, imposing, yet cautious, amber eyes fixed on the clearing. Mist swirled thickly, sunlight glinting off water droplets, fur, and moss. He realized with sudden clarity that the next movement, whether by the bears, the forest, or himself, could redefine the encounter entirely. Trust, survival, and the delicate equilibrium of the moment hung in suspense, leaving him teetering on the edge of a life-changing revelation. The mist swirled thicker now, curling like living tendrils around moss-covered rocks and ferns, obscuring the edges of the clearing and heightening the sense of isolation. The creek flowed gently, its ripples glinting with scattered sunlight, yet the serene sound seemed to contrast sharply with the taut tension hanging over the clearing. The first adult bear remained at the creek's edge, massive and commanding, amber eyes fixed on him, measuring his presence, evaluating each subtle movement. The smaller bear crouched beside it, muscles coiled, eyes bright, following every nuanced gesture. He could feel the weight of observation pressing down upon him, a tangible presence that was almost physical. Suddenly, a flicker in the mist caught the attention of the adult bear. It turned sharply, muscles rippling beneath thick fur, and fixed its gaze on the source. The smaller bear crouched lower, ears flat, clearly aware that the forest had suddenly shifted from mere observation to heightened alert. He realized that every subtle sound, every distant movement, every shadow now carried amplified meaning. The intelligence and emotional awareness displayed by the adult bear left him simultaneously awed and tense, his own pulse echoing in time with the creature's measured breath and movements. The second adult bear, previously partially concealed in the tree line, stepped forward with deliberate caution. Its amber eyes locked onto the clearing, scanning for potential threats or opportunities. The first adult bear positioned itself strategically between the newcomer and the smaller bear, muscles tense but controlled. He could see a hierarchy, a silent social negotiation unfolding, an intricate balance of respect, authority, and awareness, all communicated without a single sound. The smaller bear remained crouched, absorbing every detail, learning the complex rules of presence, risk, and survival. A sudden snap of a branch echoed through the clearing. Both adult bears froze, muscles coiled, nostrils flaring as they assessed the disturbance. The smaller bear crouched even lower, aware of the heightened tension. He realized with a shiver that the forest was alive with signals invisible to the human eye. The bear's reactions were instinctive, intelligent, and emotionally resonant, each gesture a layered communication, not just between bears but also extending to his presence in the clearing. He was both observer and participant in a living drama that few humans could ever comprehend. Then came the twist. The first adult bear took a careful step closer toward him. Amber eyes locked on his face, nostrils flaring, yet there was no aggression in the movement, only measured curiosity, acknowledgement, and a subtle invitation to respect the fragile trust it was extending. The smaller bear mirrored the motion, muscles coiled, paw raised as though poised to strike or interact. The second adult bear shifted, amber eyes flicking toward the first, muscles coiling slightly, yet there was no attack. Only observation, assessment, and a silent dialogue of trust, hierarchy, and awareness. He swallowed hard, heart hammering, as he became acutely aware of the profound intelligence and emotional depth present in the clearing. The first adult bear's gaze was unwavering, a mix of caution, patience, and perhaps recognition. The smaller bear crouched beside it, eyes bright with understanding, learning how to navigate both threat and safety. The second adult bear remained at the tree line, assessing, calculating, its presence adding a layer of suspense to an already charged scene. He realized he had stumbled into a real-world interaction that combined teaching, survival, social negotiation, and subtle emotional intelligence, an encounter few humans ever witnessed, let alone experienced so intimately. The creek glistened as sunlight caught droplets on fur and mossy rocks. Mist curled around the clearing, softening edges, amplifying tension, and creating a cinematic effect. Every movement, glance, and ripple carried significance. The adult bears were communicating in a language of gesture, posture, and scent, guiding the smaller bear, maintaining balance, and subtly including him in the observation without direct interaction. The forest had become a classroom, and he, an unexpected student, was learning lessons in awareness, patience, and respect for the delicate rhythms of wild life. Then the subtle emotional twist revealed itself. The smaller bear, encouraged by the first adult's guidance, approached the creek more confidently. Paw raised, it struck with precision, capturing a fish that wriggled and splashed. The adult bear tilted its massive head, amber eyes gleaming, letting out a soft, approving growl. The smaller bear crouched beside it, eyes bright, muscles coiled in a mix of excitement and caution. He felt a profound sense of connection, witnessing the depth of trust, patience, and teaching unfolding in a raw, emotional, and realistic setting. It was a lesson not only in survival but in social intelligence and emotional bonding. The second adult bear remained partially concealed, amber eyes flicking between the smaller bear and the first adult. The subtle positioning, measured movements, and vigilant awareness created a tension that seemed to suspend time. The mist swirled thicker, sunlight catching droplets on fur, moss, and rocks, casting a cinematic glow over the scene. He realized that the next moment could redefine everything: trust, safety, and the fragile equilibrium of the encounter hung by a thread. A sudden, sharp sound, a crackling branch, heavier than before, caused both adult bears to pivot simultaneously. The smaller bear crouched, muscles coiled, ears flat. The forest seemed to contract around them, every leaf, every root, every ripple magnified in significance. He felt the adrenaline surge, heart hammering, as the bear's intelligence and situational awareness became even more apparent. This was survival in its purest form: observation, assessment, teaching, and response, layered with emotion, strategy, and patience. The first adult bear shifted its massive body, amber eyes locking with his once again. Its nostrils flared, low growl resonating deep within its chest, not threatening but commanding attention. The smaller bear crouched beside it, tense yet poised, muscles coiled in anticipation. The second adult bear stepped slightly forward, partially emerging from the shadows, amber eyes gleaming with cautious awareness. Mist swirled around the clearing, sunlight glinting off water droplets, fur, and moss. He understood with sudden clarity that the next interaction between the bears, the forest, and himself would redefine the encounter entirely, creating either a bond, a warning, or an unspoken understanding that could last far beyond this moment. The weight of suspense, emotional resonance, and survival instincts hung heavily in the clearing, amplified by the mist and dappled sunlight. He felt every heartbeat echoing in tandem with the bears, every shallow breath mirroring their vigilance. The forest seemed suspended, waiting, as if holding its breath for the next moment to unfold. He knew that his choices, however small, mattered in this fragile, realistic, truth-based encounter, and that the intelligence and emotional awareness displayed by the bears could not be underestimated. The mist began to thin as sunlight filtered more clearly through the canopy, scattering gold and silver across the creek and moss-covered rocks. The tension that had held the clearing in a suspended state for hours slowly eased. The first adult bear, still massive and alert, shifted its weight slightly, muscles relaxing now that the moment of evaluation and teaching had passed. Amber eyes lingered on him briefly, not in threat but in acknowledgement. It was as if the creature had granted silent permission, recognition of his restraint, understanding, and the unspoken connection that had formed through observation and patience. The smaller bear, energized by the adult's calm signals, stepped closer to the creek once more. Paw lifted with precise control, it snatched a fish from the shallow water, then crouched with the prized catch beside the first adult. Amber eyes gleamed with satisfaction, a soft, approving growl vibrating from its chest. He felt an overwhelming wave of awe and emotional resonance, witnessing teaching, intelligence, and trust unfolding in such an intimate, realistic setting left him profoundly moved. It was not a spectacle of fantasy, but of true, raw life, and the depth of the bear's awareness humbled him entirely. The second adult bear, previously cautious and partially concealed in the tree line, now emerged fully into the clearing. Its posture was still deliberate, muscles coiled beneath thick fur, amber eyes scanning the area with intelligence and measured curiosity. It did not move aggressively, rather, it positioned itself so as to observe both the smaller bear and him. He realized with clarity that these creatures were exercising not just instinct, but social intelligence, emotional awareness, and careful judgment, negotiating hierarchy and space in a manner profoundly instructive and deeply emotional. For a long moment, the three bears remained in the clearing. The first adult bear returned its gaze to the smaller bear, nudging it gently as if to reaffirm a bond, provide guidance, and encourage confidence. The smaller bear crouched, attentive, then moved a few steps closer to him. He felt the tension in his chest ease further, replaced by a cautious sense of trust and understanding. In that instant, the forest seemed to breathe with them, the creek's gentle murmur, the filtered sunlight, and the lingering mist blending into a cinematic tableau of connection, learning, and shared observation. He took a tentative step forward, mindful of the first adult bear's gaze. Muscles coiled beneath the thick fur of the bear rippled as it moved, yet there was no aggressive intent, only calm observation and acknowledgement of his awareness. The smaller bear mirrored this subtle movement, pawing gently at the edge of the creek, testing the water. He realized that the bear was demonstrating patience, intelligence, and the ability to measure risk, teaching both the younger bear and him lessons about restraint, awareness, and respect. The creek glistened, sunlight catching on droplets of water thrown into the air as the smaller bear successfully snatched another fish. The adult bear tilted its head, amber eyes reflecting satisfaction, then nudged the smaller one gently. He felt an emotional weight pressing on him, a sense of privilege and humility, being allowed to witness a moment of raw, unfiltered life in the wilderness, where intelligence, teaching, and trust intersected naturally and profoundly. It was a lesson he would carry long after leaving this clearing. The second adult bear, now fully visible, took a cautious step forward, amber eyes scanning him and the clearing. The first adult bear did not respond aggressively but instead maintained its position, muscles relaxed, while still communicating subtle guidance to the smaller bear. He realized that the tension that had once filled the forest had dissolved into a structured, respectful interaction. The bear's social dynamics were complex, layered with intelligence, emotional understanding, and patience. He understood the significance of what he had witnessed. Trust had been established without a single word, threat avoided through measured observation, and a profound connection formed through shared awareness. Time seemed to slow. The first adult bear turned its massive head fully toward him, amber eyes meeting his. He held the gaze, heart pounding, aware that the connection was delicate, fragile, and extraordinary. The smaller bear crouched closer to the first, pawing gently at the water again. The second adult bear remained vigilant but relaxed slightly, amber eyes reflecting a quiet acknowledgement of the moment's resolution. He felt an intense, almost spiritual resonance, the culmination of tension, curiosity, teaching, and emotional engagement coalescing into a single, powerful experience. Then, the first adult bear gave a low, approving growl and stepped back slightly, allowing the smaller bear to approach the water more freely. The smaller bear pawed again, successfully capturing another fish, then looked back toward the adults with wide, attentive eyes. He understood the emotional significance of the gesture, patience rewarded, awareness observed, and trust reinforced. The forest, the creek, the mist, and the filtered sunlight combined into a cinematic tableau, emphasizing realism, connection, and the raw emotional depth of a truly grounded, truth-based encounter. He slowly exhaled, letting tension seep from his muscles, heart still racing but now replaced with gratitude and wonder. The first adult bear's amber gaze lingered, steady and measured, before it turned its attention fully back to the smaller bear. The teaching, the guidance, the silent communication had reached its resolution. The smaller bear crouched proudly, muscles relaxed but alert, aware that it had succeeded under the watchful eyes of both adults. He realized that he had been allowed not only to witness a natural process but also to understand the depth of intelligence, patience, and emotional awareness that define these creatures' lives. The mist continued to curl around moss-covered rocks, ferns, and tree trunks, but it now carried a sense of peace rather than tension. The creek's gentle babble provided a serene soundtrack, sunlight glinting off water droplets and fur. The adult bears moved in unison, each step deliberate, reflecting a complex balance of hierarchy, awareness, and care. The smaller bear crouched near the water's edge, pawing contentedly, eyes bright with learned confidence. He felt an overwhelming sense of awe at having been allowed into this intimate moment of life, trust, and survival. Finally, the first adult bear turned fully, amber eyes meeting his one last time. There was no threat, only acknowledgement and the silent imparting of respect. The smaller bear crouched beside it, pawing gently at the water, now confident and poised. The second adult bear moved back toward the edge of the clearing, muscles relaxed but alert, eyes scanning the forest. He understood the emotional resonance of the scene, connection had been formed, tension resolved, and trust established, all in the natural, grounded rhythms of life in the wilderness. He took a careful step backward, giving the bears space, yet feeling the profound connection linger. The forest seemed to exhale with him, the creek gurgling softly, sunlight streaming through the canopy. The bears remained, teaching and observing, but the crisis of awareness had passed. He reflected on the lessons, patience, respect, trust, and the intelligence inherent in these creatures. He realized that humans could learn from such interactions, that observation without interference could yield insight into emotional depth, social dynamics, and instinctive intelligence. Finally, as the sunlight strengthened and the mist lifted, the first adult bear nudged the smaller bear gently toward the creek once more, amber eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The smaller bear crouched, pawing successfully at the water, then looked back at the adult, eyes wide with understanding and pride. He felt a surge of gratitude and humility. The encounter, tense, suspenseful, and emotionally charged, had reached its natural resolution. The bears had communicated, taught, and reinforced bonds, not just among themselves but with him, a human observer allowed into a rare, realistic, truth-based moment of life and learning. He exhaled slowly, heart still racing, absorbing the emotional and practical lessons of patience, observation, and respect. The mist lifted further, sunlight warming the clearing, water rippling gently. The bear's movements reflected the balance and harmony of life in the wilderness. The first adult turned to the smaller bear one last time, amber eyes gleaming with quiet pride and acknowledgement. The second adult bear, now fully at ease, retreated slightly into the edge of the forest, maintaining vigilance but relaxed. The forest, the creek, the sunlight, and the bears themselves created a cinematic, realistic tableau of survival, intelligence, and emotional resonance, a grounded story of connection and trust. He stepped back fully, giving the bears space, heart full, mind racing with awe, gratitude, and reflection. The mist continued to curl around rocks and ferns, the creek gurgled peacefully, and sunlight streamed through the canopy in cinematic shafts. He understood the lasting significance of the encounter, emotional depth, social intelligence, and trust had been witnessed in one of the most authentic, truth-based ways possible. The bears had taught, observed, and communicated without words, imparting lessons of patience, awareness, and respect that would linger far beyond the clearing. As he prepared to leave, he took one final look at the first adult bear, Amber Eyes meeting his in a silent farewell. The smaller bear crouched beside it, pawing gently at the creek, Amber Eyes bright and confident. The second adult bear lingered at the edge of the clearing, watching, waiting, then slowly disappearing into the mist and trees. The forest returned to its normal rhythms, yet the connection, the lessons, and the emotional resonance of this grounded, realistic encounter remained indelibly etched in his mind. He exhaled deeply, chest still tight with adrenaline but softened by wonder and understanding. In that moment, he knew he had not only survived a tense encounter with wild bears but had been allowed to witness the complexity, intelligence, and emotional depth of creatures often misunderstood. He felt hope, respect, and empathy swell within him, a profound connection to the natural world, its inhabitants, and the subtle, truth-based drama that unfolds daily in the wilderness. Finally, he whispered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else, "I will never forget this. I will never forget what they taught me." He took one last step back, turning slowly, leaving the clearing behind. Yet the forest, the bears, and the creek remained vivid in his mind, a living memory of trust, teaching, and emotional resonance. He had seen, felt, and learned what few humans ever do, an intimate, grounded story of survival, intelligence, and connection, completely realistic and truth-based. What would you have done if you found yourself in this clearing with a bear teaching its young? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to witness more real, emotional wildlife encounters.